Good morning, everyone. This is Kent Boswell. I'm the director of ADECA. I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend, and this meeting is to actually kick off our grant application workshop. I'd like to make a few comments if I could and give a little background. The Alabama Broadband Accessibility Fund was established through legislation signed by Governor Ivey on March of 2018. On May the 30th, 2019, Governor Ivey signed into Act number 2019-327, which provided numerous amendments to the original Act. The Alabama Broadband Accessibility is designed to help non-government broadband providers deploy high-speed internet services to previously unserved rural areas. The minimum service threshold that is in connection to the internet that provides capacity for transmission at an average speed per customer of that of at least 25 megabytes per second downstream, at least 3 megabytes per second upstream. Since 18, approximately 19.8 million has been awarded to the broadband providers across the state. This will provide services to approximately 25,000 households, businesses, and community anchors. Let me also add how much we appreciate y'all helping ADECA deploy these services to the much needed areas of the state from the standpoint of making a permanent resource available to the Alabama citizens. But for those that are on the phone that has helped from the standpoint of the ABC for Students, please accept my sincere appreciation on behalf of ADECA, as well as Governor Kay Ivey's appreciation for making sure that our students have been able to get the resources that they need to learn from home. Because after all, for those that have participated that is on this line, y'all have worked very hard and tirelessly to help us get this deployed. And I would tell you, based on CTC, our consultant, we have one of the most successful nation, or one of the most successful programs providing broadband for students from the virtual learning aspect of anyone in the nation. So a heartily thank you and appreciation for all your help. Chris, I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple housekeeping items. If you are joining through Microsoft Teams, if you have any questions or concerns, you can click on the little dialog box that's to the left of the hand, and you can type any questions or comments you have at this time. And also, this meeting is being recorded, and once we're completed, we will upload it to the ADECA website, so everybody can have a chance to look at that. And I'll turn over to Ms. Murray Neighbors, who is our division chief, and she's going to go through some items.
Good morning, and welcome to our workshop this morning. I would like to thank the director for his welcoming remarks, and he is always very supportive of our program, so we're glad to have him this morning. I want to direct your attention to our Broadband Alabama website. Most everything you could want to know about the program is located on that webpage. We have on our website, obviously, the executive order that moved the broadband program to ADECA, and also the legislation itself that created the Alabama Broadband Accessibility Act. And the most current version of the legislation is available for your review on the website. If, go down a little bit. We have a promotional video on our website that tells you a little bit about the program and some of our priorities and some of the progress that we've made. So I invite you to watch the video. And as you scroll through our website, you'll also find information about the Alabama Broadband Connectivity for Students program, or ABC for Students. As the director said, that's been an exciting program for us, and we are so glad for the many of you who are on this call today who are partners in that program. Any other news or announcements also can be found in that section. As we go down a little further into our website, we have the broadband speed survey. That's been, we've had some very good input from that, and our contractor, CTC Technology and Engineering, Energy, CTC for short, has been conducting that for us, and they are using that for our long-range strategic plan for broadband in Alabama. Then we have our annual reports that we do in our current strategic plan that we are replacing with the work being done by CTC. We have the requirements, if you need our assistance in getting the support letters for the USDA Reconnect program, the steps are provided there. And we also have an opportunity to sign up our mailing list. Many of you are already on it, and that's how you heard about today's workshop. But if you are not on that mailing list, we strongly recommend that you get on the mailing list so that we can keep you informed about what's going on in broadband in Alabama. Then the important part that we get to is our grant application. We have the application and guide and the rating criteria, which are the things that are going to be most beneficial to you in preparing your application over the next 90 days. We also have the submitted grant applications from previous years. Just to note that all applications that we receive that are being considered for funding have to be posted on the website. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the application, but we do remind you that your applications are going to be made public. The following section is a list of all of the projects by year through governor's award letters that have been funded since the beginning of the program. We have the ADECA broadband maps, and a disclaimer on that, those are the current maps, but they will be updated within the next 2 weeks. So we do want you to use caution in using that map. But those maps are relatively consistent, but there have been some updates since the last map was published. So our GIS team is working on that now to make sure that you have the best information available. Those maps are based on the FCC data, so they are not accurate beyond what they were created to show. The filters that are used on our maps are based on our definitions and not the definitions of federal programs. So make sure that as you are looking at the FCC maps and you see an area FCC map shows as being served and our map shows it as being unserved, just remember we applied the filters based on our definitions. So we do encourage you to contact us if you have questions so that we can get your GIS people in touch with our GIS people so that you all understand and are looking at the same map data. The next section is the program guide and implementation. These are the forms and documents that you'll need should you be awarded and have answers to your basic questions. Somewhere on there is a frequently asked questions.
Second from the top.
Yes, second from the top, and that's what, if we can go ahead and open that up. I'm going to go through this very quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chris to go through the PowerPoint presentation. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box, and we will answer them as part of our presentation today. So one of the first questions we had early on was about our quick track for permits. We do not have an expedited process for the Alabama Broadband Accessibility Act. However, we do have an interagency agreement that do allow for the fast tracking for the USDA Reconnect program. The time frame for award, obviously that changes every year because our start date changes every year. But this year, based on our start date of today, the time frame is provided for you in number 2. But the one that everyone is concerned about is that applications must be submitted by February 8th, and that is the correct time, 11:59 p.m. So I won't be here personally opening those emails, but you can send them as long as they are time-stamped by 11:59 p.m. on February 8th. Once that date has expired, the following day, we will get the applications on the website so that challengers may have an opportunity to review them and make any challenges within 30 business days. And then we will make announcements by May 7th. We will be going into more detail about the challenge process and any other process that are part of the application. Number 3, we've already addressed that the applications will be posted online. So then we have questions about procurement and environmental. These funds are completely funded through state funding, state dollars. So federal requirements are not, for the most part, we don't have any federal requirements. The exception will be as if you are using these funds as matching funds for a federal program, the rules of that federal program will probably affect all funds associated with the project, including these funds. So in those cases, any environmental or permitting or other processes or procurement processes that you're required to undertake as a requirement of those federal funds will probably apply to these funds as well. We are not applying those funds, however. Again, if you need a shapefile or any other assistance with the map, we can put you in touch with our GIS folks. The next question has to do with the CAF 1 and CAF Phase 2 funding. For the most part, if your project under any CAF funding did not require 25-3, then the project area is eligible. If your CAF agreement did include 25-3, it may not be eligible, so we recommend you contact us for technical assistance. Go ahead. So we have provided a map. Again, it is not as accurate as anyone would like it to be. It is based on the FCC data, and it is our definition of served and unserved. We strongly recommend that if you're going to invest the time, energy, and resources into submitting an application, that you do some field survey work before you submit the application. If a project is shown as unserved at the time the application is submitted, but the project area can be documented as served before the final grant agreement is executed, in most likelihood, the project will be determined ineligible. So it is in your best interest to do some research into the area and make sure that it is not served if it's an area that is not part of an area that you're already considering working in. Terrestrial broadband service, for our purposes, would exclude cellular and satellite, but we do include fixed wireless. Applicants may submit more than one application. Those applications, if it's multiple project areas in separate applications, you'll need a full separate application. And you will need to make sure that each project independently meets the requirements of the program. Projects that are currently underway may be eligible for funding. However, any activities that take place prior to the execution of the grant agreement or the effective date of the grant agreement will not be eligible for reimbursement. So if you're doing work now, that money, that part of your project cannot be reimbursed. However, if there's a part of the project that has not been completed and that you are using our funds to pay for, as long as those activities don't take place until after the grant agreement is, the effective date of the grant agreement, you may be eligible for reimbursement. Please keep in mind that all activities have to be completed within 2 years. It is a reimbursement-only program, which means that all activities must be completed, and at the end of the program, the reimbursement will be made, and it is only for eligible funds that took place during the grant period. Chris is going to go into more detail about the challenge process, but this is a big part of the project. Is that part of how we determine or make sure that we are following the requirements of the legislation, which is to only provide service in unserved areas. If a current provider can show that an area already has 25/3 service and your application is proposing to serve that area, your project will be deemed ineligible. They must submit the documentation, and it has to be submitted by email by our deadline, and you will be given an opportunity to amend your project to take out any areas in question. Or if you agree with their challenge and just didn't realize that the area was already served, you can rescind your project. Or your third option is you may dispute the challenge, but you will have to fully document your dispute. Both parties will only have one opportunity to make their case for the challenge and for the dispute, and ADECA will make the final decision as to whether or not the project is eligible. In an unserved area, or an area that appears to be served based on the FCC data, if a provider or applicant believes the area is not truly served and is willing to do the work to document that the area isn't served, you may contact ADECA prior to the application submittal and review with us your methodology for documenting that the area is not really served. And if we approve your methodology, then you can pursue that methodology, conduct whatever surveys or studies that you intend to do show that the area is not served, and then you may submit that application. But that must be approved prior to submitting an application. This has been a problem in the past. We've had numerous applications for project areas where in the application they challenged the FCC data, but they didn't get their methodology approved with us first. And what they said was they used as documentation was not adequate, nor were they able to show us on a map that the area that they did their challenge work on was actually consistent with the project area. So we have some very specific criteria that we would like to go over with you if that's something you would like to pursue. And again, it must be approved prior to the application deadline. Last year we had some questions about what specific evidence meant with some of the new eligible activities that were in the legislation. And while this is not an exhaustive list of possible examples, it is an example to give you an idea. And so in this we use the case of a hospital. They want to provide a service that requires greater speeds than are currently available. They've contacted the existing provider and asked if there was a way to get the greater speeds, and they were told that they could not get the greater speeds, and they have something, a letter, or someone is willing to sign something that they spoke to somebody. But there is something that says that those speeds are not available by the current provider. The legislation is not offering to improve service in an area just because a customer doesn't like the existing provider. It has to be a lack of capacity or service. And so if we have specific evidence that a greater speed is necessary for something that an entity wants to use and that greater speed is not available, that is what we were looking for in terms of specific evidence. We talked about number 15. Unfortunately, the way the legislation is written, it doesn't provide time frames for when a project, when an area becomes served. So if before we execute the grant agreement or the effective date of the grant agreement, an area ADECA becomes aware that the area is actually served, even if the map showed that it was unserved, it is possible that the project area could be deemed ineligible. So please make sure that you're doing appropriate field work before submitting the applications. So as a clarification on the middle mile project, this is one of those areas that in many cases we may recommend that you go ahead and get technical assistance. It's a little bit complicated. The way the legislation is worded, there are several separate areas to consider, but generally speaking, the legislation refers to a project where another eligible applicant will connect other, let me back up here. Demonstrates that the project will connect other service providers eligible for grants under this section with broadband infrastructure further upstream in order to enable such providers to offer broadband service to end users. So the word that we've had issue with is the will connect other service providers. Our interpretation is that the requirement is there be a companion application to a middle mile project that is for an eligible project area. There are some caveats to that have to do with the previous question. So we do recommend technical assistance if you are not sure about your middle mile project. So at this point, that takes care of our frequently asked questions. These are the things that have come up repeatedly over the past 3 funding cycles. These are the things that tend to cause the most problems in the application process for our applicants and for our rating team. And our hope was that by kind of going over these on the front end, we might eliminate some of those problems for folks. All of these questions are good questions that we have gotten from our applicants, and we truly have given thoughtful consideration to these answers. And if you have any questions after the workshop, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to provide any technical assistance that we can. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to review the program. Chris, do we have any questions before you start?
I'm going to check real quick. Doesn't look like we do. But if at any time going through the PowerPoint you have a question, please type it in, and we will definitely answer that. All right, so to start off, Director Boswell kind of mentioned this, a little history of the Alabama Broadband Accessibility Act. On March 28, 2018, Governor Ivey signed the Alabama Broadband Accessibility Act, which established the Alabama Broadband Accessibility Fund. On May 30th, 2019, Governor Ivey then signed Act 2019-327, which provided numerous amendments to the original act. So a few broadband definitions that we just wanted to go over. The first is the end user. The end user is defined as a residential business, institutional, or government entity that uses broadband service for its own purposes and does not resell such broadband services to other entities. An internet service provider, or ISP, and mobile wireless service provider are not end users for the purpose of this act. As mentioned before a few times, the minimum service threshold is defined as a connection to the internet that provides capacity for transmission as an average speed per customer of at least 25 megabytes per second downstream and at least 3 megabits per second upstream. We then go to a rural area, which is defined as any area within this state not included within the boundaries of any incorporated city or town having a population in excess of 25,000 inhabitants according to the last federal census. And then to just kind of go over the middle mile project again, a broadband infrastructure project that does not provide broadband service to end users and end user devices is kind of one of the key points of that. And then we talk about a middle mile project is where the applicant demonstrates that the project will connect other service providers eligible for grants under this section with broadband infrastructure further upstream in order to enable such providers to offer broadband service to end users, provided that eligible projects under this subdivision may include projects in an unserved area or a rural area that does not meet the definition of unserved area, but otherwise meets the requirements of this section, for which the grant applicant demonstrates by specific evidence the need for greater broadband speeds, capacity, or service which is not being offered by an existing service provider. Just to kind of touch on, again, the unserved area, any rural area in which there's not at least one provider of terrestrial broadband service that is either offering a connection to the internet meeting the minimum service threshold, or is required under the terms of the Federal Universal Service Fund or other federal or state grant to provide a connection to the internet at speeds meeting the minimum service threshold by March 28, 2023. Projects to provide broadband service to a specific hospital, public school, public safety, or economic development site in a rural area that does not meet the definition of an unserved area, but otherwise meets the requirements of this section, for which the grant applicant demonstrates by specific evidence the need for greater broadband speed, capacity, or service which is not being offered by an existing service provider. I know we talked a little bit about that before. So moving on to eligibility requirements. So grants may be awarded through the program to non-governmental entities that are cooperatives, corporations, limited liability companies, partnerships, or other private that provide broadband services. And nothing in the Act shall expand the authority under state law of any entity to provide broadband service. Moving on to funding, awards may not exceed the lesser of either 35% of the project cost or $1.5 million for projects that will be capable of transmitting broadband signals at or above the minimum service threshold. Any award of state funds under this Act, when combined with other forms of state or federal support or assistance dedicated to the project, other than interest-bearing loans, may not exceed 60% of the total project cost. Some additional requirements are that not less than 40% of funds appropriated for grants through this program will be utilized in unincorporated areas of the state, and grants issued under subdivisions 2 and 3 that we previously talked about concerning middle mile and the need for greater broadband speed shall not exceed 40% of the total funds appropriated from grants on an annual basis. So some of the priority areas that we look for and that are mentioned in the application are to seek to leverage grant funds through private investment and extension of existing infrastructure, to serve locations with demonstrated community support, including but not limited to documented support from local government, to demonstrate the operator's technical and managerial capabilities to complete the project within 2 years of the grant, and then to demonstrate the applicant's necessary financial resources. Additionally, it is a project that is most cost-effective and technically efficient in that they propose to serve the highest number of unserved homes, businesses, and community anchor points for the least cost and best level of service, emphasizing projects including the highest broadband speeds. Also to provide material broadband enhancement to hospitals located in rural areas. Also to support local libraries in this state for the purpose of assisting the libraries in offering digital literacy training pursuant to state library and archive guidelines. Some additional considerations that we look at in the application are the average pole attachment rates that a grant applicant charges to an unaffiliated entity, provided that the subdivision shall not apply to a utility as defined under Section 37-4-1-7A. Applicants that provide documentation that it has been certified by the ADECA Office of Minority Business Enterprise or otherwise as a disadvantaged business enterprise. That part can earn extra points in the application, but we do have to have documentation for that. Kind of an overview, I know we've talked about it a little bit already, but the program timeline. So the open application period begins today and runs through February 8th of 2021. And as mentioned before, all applications will be posted on the ADECA website following the due date. The challenge period for existing providers is, again, 30 business days, and that will be from February 9th, 2021 to March 23rd, 2021. As mentioned before, any challenges would need to be sent to our broadband.fund@adeca.alabama.gov website with proper documentation showing that that area is already served. Our due date for responses to the challenge is April 22nd, 2021, and then award announcement date will be by May 7th of 2021. So payment requirements, providers, grants shall be paid within 30 days upon ADECA receiving written certification of the completion of the project and evidence of compliance with the terms of the grant as prescribed by ADECA. Grant shall be conditioned on project completion within 2 years of awarding the grant. If a recipient does fail to complete a project within the 2-year deadline due to reasons other than delay caused by a government entity, ADECA does have the right to revoke the grant in its entirety and rededicate the funds to a new recipient. Some reporting requirements: the progressive completion is measured on not more than a quarterly basis of the approved project. Operational testing, when possible, to confirm the level of service proposed in the grant application. Such regulations shall not exceed in degree or differ in kind from testing and reporting requirements imposed on the grant recipient by the Federal Communications Commission as adjusted for the service specifications in the ADECA grant agreement. So here's the contact information again. As we discussed, all applications will need to be sent in preferably a PDF form to broadband.fund@alabama.gov. We do have our street and mailing address if you need those, and as Maureen went through our website, that's located adeca.alabama.gov/broadband. And again, please sign up for our email notifications. That's just important to to get notified about future funding opportunities and all kinds of important information. We also have on our website our program guide, which goes more thoroughly through everything. And as Maureen mentioned, it also includes our application and guide and our rating tool. I'm going to check and see if there are any questions. Okay, so one question was, when will eligibility map be available and how can we get a shapefile? As mentioned before, you can send us an email and we can get that to you. Anything else to add on that?
Yeah, the regular program map will be on the website within 2 weeks. The one that's up there now can be used in the meantime, but there have been some updates to it, and we will get that on there as quickly as possible. And if you want to send us an email at broadband.fund, we can connect you with our GIS department to get the shapefile.
All right, so we had another comment that said, is it possible that a particular provider submits an application for middle mile project and the same provider submits an application for an unserved area connected by the middle mile project? So therefore, the same provider submits an application for middle mile project and a project to serve that unserved area that is accessed by the completion of the middle mile project.
That actually came up last year, and if you'll give us a call or send us an email, we can go over the particulars of that. Yes, it will probably be okay, but we need to look at the specifics.
All right, then it looks like the last question we got is, what happens if your company submitted coverage maps to the FCC showing systems are served, but that map in the Word document doesn't reflect that update?
The map in the Word document, I'm not sure what Word document map you're talking about, but that's the most recent updates to the FCC are the layers that are being put on the map right now. So hopefully we have caught everything that has been submitted to this point. If there's a specific area that you know of that you submitted that the FCC didn't capture, you should let us know so that we can look into it.
Okay, looks like we got another question that said, will applications be reviewed after the deadline? In other words, there's no advantage or priority given to applications delivered before the deadline, and is that correct?
That's correct. It is not first come, first served. They are not reviewed in any particular order. So as long as they're here by the deadline, we will review them with the same care that we would review the first one that came in. There is no advantage to getting them in early. We do appreciate as many coming in a couple of days ahead of the deadline as possible, because it gives us that time to get them in a file to get them put on the website. But but there is no advantage to getting them in next week or anything like that. Take the time you need and do good applications and put them together, and reach out to us if you need technical assistance. You've got 90 days. There's no reason not to use them.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have.
Okay. Let's take a quick look at the application guide itself so that we can go over that very quickly to let them see what the application looks like. There are not a lot of changes from last year, so if you're one of our previous applicants, you should be familiar with it. However, it is somewhat different, so please make sure that you don't just turn in your old application. You can cut and paste from your old application into the new application and resubmit your project that way, but you will need to do an application on this year's application form. One of the things that we want to remind everybody is that this is the way our rating is set up, is to follow this application guide. So if you do not follow the application guide, it is quite likely that you will not get full points in some areas, because our rating team may or may not be familiar enough with the program to know that if you've answered the question somewhere else, that they should apply that answer in the area where you should have answered the question. So make sure you're following the guide, you fill the application out, and you do it in the order that is in the application, so that whoever is reading the application, regardless of their level of expertise, can follow along and apply the points based on the rating guide that we're giving them. So this is the application guide. It's pretty basic. We try to keep it as simple as possible. The first page just gives you some background information, and then we get into the application itself. Keep going. We've reviewed all of this material.
This is the guide. Did you want the application?
Oh, yeah, no, I want the application. Sorry. Pulled up the wrong document. I apologize. Okay, we've been through all this. Let's get to the application. Okay, so in the application itself, this is some basic information. We want to know what your project name is, the legal name of your entity. And I'll just give you all a heads up here. If you're not already registered in STARS, the vendor program in Alabama, go ahead and get that done, because we can't cut any checks to anybody who's not in STARS. When you set up your account, or if you've already set up your account, you can go back in and make adjustments if you need to. You can have it set up for electronic funds transfer, and that just speeds up the reimbursement process for you. The legal name of the entity is the name that you're listed under in STARS. That's the name that if you are awarded a project, that will be on your grant agreement. Everybody will be required to do the Beeson-Hammond certification and the disclosure, State of Alabama disclosure form. So all of the names should match in all of the different places. So make sure you're giving us the name of your entity, not your nickname, but the name that you're actually legally established as and in STARS in. Of course, your mailing address, the name and title of the CEO, but we also need the name and the title of who you want us to talk to. Sometimes it's the same person, but oftentimes it is two different people. And we need then the phone number and the email of that primary contact. Okay, go on. So we have in each section some narrative that you can provide and some tables to fill out. You can just add space in the document and add it right within the document. Some people change the font, some people change the color and answer right in there. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can add an attachment to your submission, but go ahead and answer the questions that are in the table within the document itself. So we need to know on this page how many households you're going to serve, the number of businesses or industries to be served, and the number of community anchors to be served. And that's going to be your hospitals, your schools, your libraries, places like that. We have some technical discussion we asked you to provide, including a technical evaluation that's certified by an engineer. We get that question all the time, does it actually have to be an engineer? Yeah, it does need to be an engineer, and it does need to be certified. These projects are complicated, and we need to know they're going to work. Particularly if you're using any kind of non-standard technology, that will become a very essential part of your, I guess I shouldn't say non-standard. If you're using anything other than a traditional fiber, we're going to definitely be looking at the engineering report to make sure that what you say the speeds are is something that can actually be accomplished with what you're proposing to do. This also gives some information about the mapping that we're going to need and what kinds of formats we need it in, so these can be overlaid onto our project map. We want to know about the technical and managerial capabilities to complete the project within 2 years. What we don't want to do is get to the end of 2 years and the project not be funded, and the story that gets on the front page is that ADECA rescinded grant funds and provider was never able to provide internet to an area. If we don't believe that you're going to be able to complete the project, that is going to be a criteria for whether or not we think the project should be funded. The discussion of the average pole attachments, that comes from the legislation, so you'll need to provide that information to us. And then a discussion of if the vendor plans to use, or if the provider plans to use vendors or subcontractors that are disadvantaged business enterprises. You can get some bonus points in this area for providing that information, but this is the one area where you will be required to do reporting throughout the life of the project to show that you actually did something to try and reach whatever goals you established for using disadvantaged business enterprises. Middle mile projects, if you're submitting one, this is where you would give us some details on that so that we could determine that the project meets the requirements of the legislation. And then a discussion of the hospital, public school, or public safety or economic development projects that do not meet the definition of unserved area but otherwise meets the requirements of the program as applicable. There was one application meeting that criteria last year, so we'll need to make sure that this area, this question you answer very thoroughly if you're one of those projects. So the next area is the budget. We give you this table. If it's shaded, don't fill it in. Those are self-populating fields. If you just fill in the two that are not shaded.
So you fill in the shaded.
I'm sorry, which?
You fill in the shaded areas.
Okay. Well, that's not right. But so just follow the instructions, and it will give the total grant amount requested. In this one, we have the different eligible activities. Engineering and design can certainly be part of the project cost. Materials and labor, construction and installation, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're subbing it out, it should fit into one of these categories. If it doesn't fit into one of those categories, we do have an other, but you do need to tell us what it is. We're not paying for permits or leasing costs. This is construction. Anything that we need to know about the financial modeling, this is where you should tell us. Any extra projects that you're doing, say this is a companion project to USDA Reconnect or some other project, this is where you can discuss that as well. Okay, the other program priorities, can you scroll down? These are all of the areas that are listed in the legislation that we are required to review. Each of these areas is worth 10 points. So if you're claiming one, you should check yes or no. But for any of those that you're claiming yes, you do need to provide some type of documentation and explanation as to why you're claiming yes in that category. In this last one in particular, is the applicant a certified minority business enterprise? If you are, please provide a copy of your certification. And it doesn't necessarily need to be under the Alabama Minority Business Enterprise Program. It can be under some other program that designates disadvantaged business enterprises. Okay, we have a certifications section, and this is where you're certifying to all of the components of the legislation itself that are all threshold items. If any of these is not true, then your application may not be considered for funding. That is the application guide. If you can jump over to the rating guide. And just to briefly go through this, this follows along with the application guide itself, but this is where we explain to the raters who are reviewing your project what they should be looking at and reviewing. So this is a very useful tool for you. It also gives you some ideas of what we're looking for. And so if you're not sure how to answer a particular question, go to this and look at what this says. It gives examples of things like the specific evidence. It gives examples of what would be necessary for the methodology for disputing the FCC map. So there are plenty of things in here that would be very helpful for you, so we've gone ahead and posted it. It was developed primarily for our raters, but we find that it's very helpful to the applicants to know what we're looking at. So this is a very useful tool, and I strongly encourage everybody to use it while you're developing your application. All right, let's look and see if we have any questions.
It looks like we have one from, says, do local governments have to apply for the grant, or can private companies apply without local/county government participation?
So the legislation makes these funds available only to non-government entities. So it has to be an ISP, and it has to be a non-governmental ISP in order to be eligible to apply for these funds.
Looks like that's it.
Are they able to unmute themselves?
They can unmute themselves.
Okay.
If you'd like to unmute yourself to ask a question, particularly if you're on the phone, I believe you dial *6. Or if you have any other questions that have come up and you're using the platform, you can always type that in as well.
So we'll just give folks a second here, that if you'd like to unmute yourself to ask a question, and then once you've asked the question, re-mute yourself. Feel free to ask questions at this point.
It does look like we got another one that says, can governmental entities provide letters of support to the ISP applicants for the applicant's proposal package?
Sure. Governmental entities can provide letters of support. In fact, we encourage that.
That's the last one for right now. And of course, if you have a question following the presentation, you can email us at thebroadband.fund@adeca.alabama.gov, and we can answer it there. So we'll be available throughout the application funding open window period.
All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, then we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. And again, remember, feel free to contact us by phone or by email, and we will be happy to answer any other questions you have and provide any technical assistance you may need in preparation of your application. Thank you, and good luck.